Hello, my name is Sherman Haywood Cox II of SoulPreaching.com, where we seek to celebrate the principles of the African American preaching tradition. In this video, we want to discuss the basic principles that one should follow, the steps that one should follow when putting together a sermonic plan for the church that they are preaching to. There are basically 3 steps. Now these 3 steps are actually pretty in depth. In this video we can only look at it from a very high level, but these 3 steps, if you follow, will allow you to put together an effective plan for preaching to the people. The first step that the preacher should follow is to get an idea of where the people are. Where the people are right now. What are the people dealing with? What are the struggles that are going on in the congregation at this time? What do the people need to hear? These are some important questions that we should ask ourselves when we are beginning to put together plans. Now, we definitely want to allow the people to have a voice in this, but we should also keep in mind that God has placed you as the preacher in this particular context for a reason. And so you need to understand where the people are. I've written a paper on this particular subject where we actually use narrative theory. We look at the congregation as a story. What is the story that the congregation is telling? Is it a triumphant story? Is it a futile story? Is it a story that's on that the church is on its way down into the gutter? Is it one that's going up, or is it one that is just barely keeping its head above water? We keep in mind these things and as we are seeking to understand the congregation. Who are the main players in the congregation? You would hope that the pastor is a main player, but there's also other main players. What are the stories? How are they living in the congregation? How are they leading the congregation? How are they pulling the congregation to live? These are some of the questions that we should ask ourselves when we are thinking about how we are to plan. The next step, after understanding where the people are, is to get an idea where the people should go. Now, we are definitely going to need to study the Bible. We're going to need to study aloud through prayer, find out where God needs or wants churches in general to go. But also, we need to ask ourselves, what specifically does this church need to hear at this time? Taking into account where we are, what is needed in this particular church. For example, there are churches who place too much emphasis or too much hope in humanity. Maybe there was a strong pastor who was there and that pastor has left, and now that church is floundering. I've seen that many times. Perhaps there are churches where we've all heard about where legalism is a big problem, and they're very judgmental of people. That would require certain things. Maybe they need to hear more grace. Maybe they need to hear something about God's ability to forgive. Then there are those who are like the Corinthian church who are just living any old kind of way, just going off and doing all kinds of endeavors without feeling any remorse, without feeling any need for repentance. And that would require some repentance. That would require some law being presented. That would require that side of the gospel to be presented. The earlier example of someone where a church that had been strongly led by a leader who has left. That church needs to find out or to hear more about the spirit that guides all church. that guides the church, and that it is not tied to an individual. And so you have these ideas that you keep in mind. After looking at where the church is, you find from your understanding of the gospel where the people need to be. And then we get to step 3. And the third step is that we need to find how we are going to get to that ideal that we had just described. Where the people need to go. This third step is, how are the people going to get there? What exactly are the sermons that you're going to preach? We find that, for example, that church may need to hear more about grace. Okay, how are you going to preach about grace? What are some of the images that you want to deal with when you are talking about grace? What are some of the examples you want to use from your church life, or from life in general? What are you needing or wanting to use to preach that particular truth to the people? Which scriptures are you going to use? Which stories are you going to use? That is the third step, where you are actually putting together sermon plans that address the weaknesses that you found in the first step, that helps people get from the first step to your output, which was the second step, where people need to go. And so those are the 3 general steps that you must follow when you're going to do some sermon planning. I would invite you to come to soulpreaching.com. We have a little bit of work on sermon planning. We have some more coming on board. As I've said, I've written a paper on this that we need to get up on the site. We'll get there pretty soon. But until then, I would definitely invite you to come to soulpreaching.com. I'd ask you to download the free ebook, You Can Preach 7 Steps to an Effective Sermon. You can download that book at www.soulpreaching.com/free book. And you will be able to download this ebook, print it out, that will help you learn how to preach effectively in the African American preaching tradition. Once again, this is Sherman Haywood Cox II of soulpreaching.com. Until next time, God bless you and keep on preaching.